It was a stormy night when the system finally declared the mission a failure. Affection level, 0. Conquest mission failed. System unbinding in progress. The mechanical voice rang out in my mind, cold and devoid of emotion. It was all because in the split second of the car crash, my survival instinct kicked in. I protected my own head instead of acting as a human meat shield for her golden boy, Julian Thorne. In the hospital room, Victoria Vance's eyes were bloodshot as she lunged at me, her hands gripping my throat. "Why wasn't it you who died?" she screamed. "Julian has the hands of a conductor. Can your worthless life ever pay for them?" From the hospital bed, Julian coughed weakly. "Victoria, don't blame him. It's just my bad luck." As he spoke, he shot me a provocative look and mouthed the words, "You lose, loser." Victoria looked like her heart was breaking. She turned back to me, roaring, "Get on your knees. Beg Julian for forgiveness. If you don't bang your head on the floor until he forgives you, get the hell out of the Vance family." If this were the past, I would have already been on my knees, begging until my forehead bled. But now, staring at the translucent panel hovering in my vision, showing affection level, 0, I laughed. I shoved the hysterical woman away and methodically straightened my collar. "No need to kick me out. I'm leaving on my own." I smoothed my shirt. "But before I go, I'm taking back everything I gave you." I dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. "Freeze all funds belonging to Vance Enterprises." Immediately, I hung up. The hospital room fell into a dead silence for a second. Victoria laughed as if she'd heard the world's biggest joke. "Caleb Sterling, are you addicted to acting now?" She looked me up and down, her eyes full of disdain. "You're an orphan who relies on me for handouts. What could you possibly freeze?" On the bed, Julian chimed in, his voice weak but unable to hide his smugness. "Victoria, don't lower yourself to his level. He's probably just in shock. After all, he lost so thoroughly." He called her by her first name with intimate familiarity, as if I were the outsider. I couldn't be bothered to waste words on them. I looked at Victoria with indifference. "You'll find out soon enough." With that, I turned and started packing my few personal belongings. For the past 3 years, everything I owned was charity from Victoria Vance. Now, I didn't want a single thing. I took off the cheap shirt her assistant had bought me, threw it in the trash, and changed into the old t-shirt I had worn when I first arrived. Suddenly, Victoria's phone began to ring frantically, the shrill sound cutting through the quiet of the ward. It was the death call ringtone she assigned to her CFO. She answered impatiently, shouting at me while holding the phone. "See this? This is me, always handling endless business. And you're just a burden." I ignored her and continued packing. The next second, the CFO's voice came through the speaker, distorted with terror. "Ms. Vance, it's a disaster. All of the company's bank accounts have been frozen. Incoming payments from partners are blocked, and we can't transfer a single cent out. It's a top-level directive from the Sterling family in New York. Ms. Vance, the company is done for." The arrogance on Victoria's face solidified instantly. First came shock, then disbelief, and finally, her mind seemed to go blank. The hand holding the phone began to tremble uncontrollably, nearly dropping the device. Her gaze locked onto me, dead and unmoving, as if trying to drill a hole through my face. "The Sterling family? Which Sterling family?" Her voice was dry, filled with panic. Who exactly are you?" I placed the last item that truly belonged to me into my backpack and zipped it up. Then I walked up to her, adjusted my cuffs, which had no wrinkles to begin with, and spoke calmly. "Someone you can't afford to offend." Without looking at her pale face again, I turned and walked toward the door. Julian panicked on the bed, trying to sit up. "Victoria, he can't just leave like this." But Victoria stood there like a statue, drained of all strength, motionless. I opened the door and didn't look back. Behind me was the sound of her world beginning to collapse. As for me, I felt like the suffocation of the past 3 years had finally lifted, allowing me to exhale my first breath of fresh air. This was only the beginning. I had barely taken a few steps out of the room when rushed footsteps and chaotic shouting erupted behind me. "Ms. Vance, you have to think of something. The bank has issued a final ultimatum. If we don't repay the loan by today, they'll initiate forced liquidation. The partners for the major projects have all sent termination letters. Ms. Vance, the rug has been pulled out from under us." It was the executives of Vance Enterprises. Usually dressed in impeccable suits, they now looked pale as ghosts, as if they were mourning their own deaths. They rushed into Julian's hospital room, surrounding Victoria. Through the door, I could feel the despair and panic radiating from inside. Victoria finally snapped out her daze. She rushed out of the room, grabbing my arm, her nails digging into my flesh. You did this. It was you, wasn't it? Her eyes were bloodshot, the icy arrogance gone, replaced by hysterical madness. What do you want? As long as you get the Sterlings to back off, I'll give you anything. Money? Status? Or, she gritted her teeth, as if making a huge resolution. Or me. I looked at her and found it incredibly ironic. For 3 years, I gave her my genuine heart, and she treated it like trash. Now, I simply moved a finger, and she was willing to use herself as a bargaining chip. How laughable. Seeing his meal ticket threatened, Julian on the bed immediately started his performance. Victoria, the company is important. Go handle it. I'll be fine. Cough, cough. He clutched his chest, feigning a pitiful, understanding look. Victoria struggled for a second between her company and her golden boy. Reason 1. She violently threw off my hand, gritting her teeth as she chose to go clean up her company's mess. Before leaving, she glared at me with venomous hatred, enunciating every word. Caleb Sterling, you just wait. I won't let this go. I watched her and her entourage leave in a pathetic scramble, my expression blank. Wait? I waited for you for 3 years. Now, it's your turn to wait. I turned toward the elevator, ready to leave this nauseating place. Just as I brushed past a woman, a faint scent of perfume drifted into my nose. It wasn't the cold, woody scent Victoria wore, but an aggressive, mature, and alluring rose fragrance. Subconsciously, I stopped. The woman stopped too. She was wearing a sharp, red bodycon dress that outlined her breathtaking curves perfectly. Her long, wavy hair draped casually over her shoulders. Her lips were fiery red, and her beauty was striking. Her entire aura was powerful, confident, and tinged with a hint of playfulness. Scarlett Pierce, the sole heiress to Pierce Global, and Victoria Vance's biggest rival in the business world. She looked with interest in the direction Victoria had disappeared, then turned her gaze to me. You're the first person who has ever made Victoria Vance lose her composure like that. Her voice had a lazy rasp to it. It was pleasant to hear. I glanced at her, said nothing, and walked straight to the elevator. Scarlett Pierce clicked along in her stilettos, following unhurriedly, the corners of her red lips curving up. I'm very interested in you. The youngest son of a New York Sterling dynasty actually willing to play the lapdog for Victoria Vance for 3 years. It's truly baffling. She had clearly already investigated my identity. I pressed the down button. The doors slowly slid open. I walked in, and just as they were about to close, I looked back at her. Soon, you won't be saying that. The elevator doors shut, cutting off her probing gaze. Finally, the corners of my mouth curled into a genuine smile. Victoria Vance, your nightmare is only just officially beginning. A few days later, the grand concert hall at the university was packed to the rafters. Under the spotlight, Julian Thorne, dressed in a white tuxedo, bowed elegantly to the audience. Today was his solo recital, and also the award ceremony where the school would name him Outstanding Young Artist. I sat in the most inconspicuous corner of the audience, watching coldly. The crisis at Vance Enterprises clearly hadn't been resolved, but Victoria still forced herself to wear designer clothes and sit in the front row of the VIP section to support her beloved. Her complexion was poor. The dark circles under her eyes couldn't be hidden even by thick foundation. Yet, when she looked at Julian, her eyes were still full of infatuation and pride. Julian began his acceptance speech. He held the trophy, his gaze sweeping across the hall, before landing pointedly in my direction. I want to thank my alma mater and my professors. Of course, the person I want to thank the most is Victoria. He looked at her deeply. When I was at my lowest, she was the one who supported me and believed in me. Polite applause and cheers erupted from the audience. Julian changed his tone, adding a layer of disdain. I also want to thank certain people for leaving, allowing me to focus more on pure art. After all, the Temple of Art cannot tolerate sand or trash. As soon as his voice fell, a few of his friends behind him immediately cooperated by laughing loudly in my direction. The eyes of the entire concert hall instantly focused on me. Finger-pointing and whispering ensued. Isn't that Caleb Sterling, the guy who was always following Victoria around? I heard Victoria dumped him. Look at him, pathetic. What's there to pity? Just a simp. He deserves it. Victoria sat in the VIP seat, looking down at me from her high vantage point, her eyes icy. That look seemed to say, see, this is the difference between you and my man, heaven and earth. I kept my face expressionless, though I felt a slight urge to laugh. Julian began to play his famous piece, Echoes of the Starry Night. The melodious piano notes rang out. I had to admit, he did have some talent. When the piece ended, the applause was thunderous. The host walked onto the stage excitedly. Thank you, Julian, for that auditory feast. Echoes of the Starry Night never gets old. Truly the peak original work of Julian Thorne. Then, the host shifted the topic and looked at me. Today, we also have a special guest, Mr. Caleb Sterling. I heard there were some small misunderstandings between Mr. Sterling and Julian. Julian is magnanimous and hopes to use this opportunity to bury the hatchet. Let's give a round of applause to invite Mr. Caleb Sterling to the stage. Here it comes. This was the trap they had designed long ago. A grand banquet to make me lose face under the spotlight, to make me kneel and beg for mercy. I stood up and, under everyone's gaze, walked step by step toward the stage. As I passed Victoria, she lowered her voice, speaking at a volume only the two of us could hear. Kneel down and apologize to Julian now. Beg for his forgiveness. Her tone carried a hint of charity. Maybe I can ask the Sterling family to go easy and spare my company. Even now, she thought she had the leverage to negotiate with me. I walked onto the stage and took the microphone from the host. Julian stood by the piano, adjusting his bow tie, a triumphant and arrogant smile on his face. I didn't look at him. Instead, I faced the thousands of audience members and spoke slowly. This piece, Echoes of the Starry Night, is indeed not bad. The hall went quiet. I paused, then smiled. It's a pity it isn't original. One stone stirred 1,000 waves. The audience instantly erupted. Julian's face went sheet white. What nonsense are you spouting? What does a loser like you know about music? He roared, flustered and angry. I ignored his shouting. I calmly took my phone out of my pocket, tapped an audio file, and played it through the microphone. A slightly aged but passionate piano recording echoed through the concert hall. At first, everyone was confused. But when the music reached the climax, everyone's expression changed. That melody was almost identical to the most brilliant part of Julian's Echoes of the Starry Night. I turned off the music, my voice clearly reaching every corner. This piece is called Tears of the Danube. Its creator is a relatively unknown Bulgarian composer named Anton Petrov, written in 1998. And Mr. Julian Thorne, 3 years ago, happened to be an exchange student at the National Academy of Music in Sofia, Bulgaria, for 6 months. I raised my phone. On the screen were Julian's flight information and enrollment record from that year. I'd like to ask Mr. Thorne, is this just a coincidence? Ironclad proof. Julian's persona as a genius conductor and original musician collapsed instantly in that moment. He shook all over, his lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. The audience turned from shock to anger. Plagiarist. Get out of the music circle. Fraud. Give me back my ticket money. Disgusting. We actually treated him like an idol. Countless insults and pieces of trash were thrown onto the stage toward Julian like a tidal wave. He couldn't stand anymore and collapsed onto the piano bench, his face ashen. In the VIP section, Victoria's face was even paler and uglier than his. She looked at me with eyes full of terror and unfamiliarity, as if she were meeting me for the first time. I dropped the microphone and walked off the stage amidst the overwhelming cursing. The show was over. The scandal of Julian's plagiarism exploded online like a bomb. Hashtag Genius Conductor is a plagiarist. Hashtag Julian Thorne get out. Hashtag Victoria Vance is blind. Various hashtags took turns topping the trending lists on Twitter and social media. This became the final straw that crushed the already teetering Vance Enterprises. The stock price hit the limit down overnight, evaporating billions in value. Partners who were watching from the sidelines officially filed for contract termination, citing unethical conduct of associated figures damaging brand image, demanding huge compensations. Victoria was burned out, begging for help everywhere, but hitting walls at every turn. Her only chance to turn things around was to secure the development rights for the South City land plot. As long as she could land that project, she could attract new investment and bring Vance Enterprises back from the dead. To this end, she sold off the last few properties in her name, scraped together the funds, and arrived at the auction. She thought this was the start of her comeback. She didn't know this was just another grand humiliation I had prepared for her. The auction was packed with high society. When I appeared with Scarlett Pierce, we instantly drew the attention of the entire room. I wore a perfectly tailored bespoke suit, exuding calm authority. Beside me, Scarlett wore a deep V black evening gown, sexy and dangerous, her red lips enchanting, her figure hot, swaying with every step. Standing together, we looked like a king and his queen. Victoria saw us too. She sat alone in a corner, wearing a slightly worn business suit, unable to hide the exhaustion on her face. When her eyes met mine, I clearly saw jealousy, unwillingness, and intense hatred. In front of the radiant, powerful Scarlett, she was contrasted like a destitute, defeated rooster. This crushing comparison hurt more than any words. The auction officially began. The bidding for the South City plot was fiercely competitive. Victoria went all in, raising her paddle frequently, appearing desperate every time. I sat like a patient hunter, watching my prey struggle in the trap. Whenever Victoria raised her paddle, shouting a price at her limit, I would unhurriedly raise mine, adding just 1 million. Not much, just enough to suppress her. Once, twice, 3 times. Everyone in the auction hall realized my intention. I was toying with her. I was using capital to slap her face, over and over. Cold sweat beaded on Victoria's forehead. Her hand holding the paddle began to shake. Every price increase felt like cutting her own flesh. Scarlett whispered into my ear, laughing softly. "Caleb, you're so bad." Her breath was warm, carrying the scent of roses, her posture intimate and ambiguous. I turned to look at her. She was looking right back, her eyes shimmering with appreciation for power. The final round of bidding. Victoria used every ounce of her strength to shout a sky-high price. 2 billion. This was all the fun she could muster, her last hope. She looked at me with bloodshot eyes, a hint of pleading in her gaze. Meeting her gaze, I slowly raised the paddle in my hand. 2 billion, 100 million. The auctioneer's gavel fell heavily. Sold. Victoria's last hope was extinguished by my own hand. She collapsed in her chair, looking as if her bones had been removed. She lost. Lost completely, left with nothing. After the auction, my phone screen lit up. The caller ID showed Victoria. Scarlett leaned over curiously to take a look. In front of her, I revealed a mocking smile and unhesitatingly pressed the reject button. Then, methodically, I dragged her number into the blacklist. Just someone irrelevant, I said to Scarlett, my tone as indifferent as if discussing the weather. I tossed the phone onto the table, the screen still displaying the added to block list notification. Victoria Vance, from now on, you don't even have the right to harass me. The disastrous defeat at the auction pronounced the death sentence for Vance Enterprises. I didn't give Victoria any breathing room. Using the Sterling family name, I registered a new investment firm in the city called Morningstar Capital. Scarlett's company, Pierce Global, became my first and most important strategic ally. Together, we launched a textbook hostile takeover of the remaining quality assets of Vance Enterprises. I utilized every business tactic I learned from the Sterling family, precisely striking every weakness of her company, turning her few remaining core executives and dismantling her final business alliances. Overnight, the entire business world was buzzing about this young Mr. Sterling, who had appeared out of nowhere. They called me ruthless, calculating, a true dragon crossing the river. They didn't know that all my ruthlessness stemmed from the endless humiliation Victoria Vance had brought me over the past 3 years. To pay off the company's massive debts and penalties, Victoria was forced to start selling everything under her personal name. The mid-level mansion she was once so proud of, the row of limited-edition sports cars in the garage, the mountain of luxury bags and couture gowns in her walk-in closet. Everything that symbolized her noble status had now become second-hand goods for sale on websites. For the first time, she experienced the embarrassment of poverty and the fickleness of the world. The CEO who once bossed me around from her high horse was now strapped for cash, unable to even afford a decent lawyer for her bankruptcy proceedings. The so-called friends who used to circle her now avoided her like the plague, not answering calls or returning texts. I had people monitoring her asset liquidation constantly. When her favorite pink Bugatti, one of only 3 in the world, went up on a second-hand site, I didn't hesitate to have someone buy it. The next day, Scarlett Pierce drove that flashy pink sports car and appeared downstairs at my office. She rolled down the window and gave me a charming smile. A thank you gift. I love it. In the sunlight, both she and the car were excessively dazzling. This scene happened to be witnessed by Victoria, who had come to my company to beg for mercy. She stood across the street, watching the car that should have been hers carrying another woman, one more beautiful and successful than her, who was smiling radiantly at the man Victoria had once treated like dirt. I saw her trembling with rage, her face as pale as paper. I didn't bother giving her even a glance. I turned around, took Scarlett's arm, and walked into the headquarters building that had originally belonged to the Vance Group. A few days later, Morningstar Capital officially took over. I sat in a spacious office on the top floor that used to be Victoria's. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, I could overlook the city's prosperity. The view here was indeed nice. I spun around in the leather executive chair, like a newly crowned king, coldly surveying the empire I had conquered. As for the former queen, I had personally crushed her crown and thrown her into the dust. She must be busy worrying about her next meal right now, shouldn't she? His feeling was good. Without Victoria as his powerful backer, Julian's fate was even worse than hers. The plagiarism scandal continued to ferment. The Bulgarian composer he had plagiarized, with my friendly sponsorship, filed a transnational lawsuit demanding an astronomical sum for copyright infringement. To distance themselves and protect their century-old reputation, Julian's alma mater immediately announced his expulsion and revoked all his honors. Overnight, he went from the chosen one, adored by millions, to a rat crossing the street that everyone shouted to beat. His properties and luxury cars were frozen by the court to prepare for compensation. He went to Victoria, hoping she could help. But Victoria, unable to save herself, had no time for him. Reportedly, the two had a massive fight in the cheap rental apartment Victoria was living in. Victoria cursed him as the jinx who ruined everything for her, while Julian called her heartless and unjust. The once perfect couple was now left with only resentment and insults, parting on bad terms. Desperate, Julian actually thought of begging me. He ambushed me downstairs at my company. Seeing me get out of the car, he lunged like a dog, kneeling before me with snot and tears streaming down his face. Mr. Sterling, Caleb, I was wrong. I was truly wrong. He wept bitterly, confessing and slapping his own face. It was all Victoria. She made me treat you that way. She said you were just a dog she kept and told me I didn't need to treat you like a human. She was jealous of your talent and afraid you'd steal my thunder. So she made me set up the humiliation at the concert. He pushed all the responsibility onto Victoria, scrubbing himself clean. Watching his hypocritical, nauseating face, I felt only disgust. I remembered his arrogance in the hospital room when he silently mouthed loser to me. I remembered how he enjoyed Victoria's protection while recklessly humiliating and trampling on me. Please, Mr. Sterling, let me go. I won't dare do it again. He hugged my pant leg, begging bitterly. I frowned in disgust, raised my foot, and kicked him aside. Security, I shouted. Two burly security guards immediately rushed over, hoisting him up by his arms. I walked up to him, looking down from above. Aren't your hands very precious? I asked lightly. He paused, not understanding my meaning. I smiled, my tone icy. Go carry bricks at a construction site. That should be good exercise for your finger flexibility. I pulled a few strings to ensure every decent job in the city slammed its door in his face. A few days later, I received a photo from my subordinate. In the photo, Julian was wearing dirty work clothes and a hard hat, struggling to carry heavy cement under the scorching sun. His precious hands, which once played beautiful movements, were now covered in dust and mud, blistered and bloody. I heard that Victoria also saw Julian's miserable state on the news. She locked herself in a rental for a day and night without coming out. I wondered if she regretted it. Regretted ruining everything for such a selfish, hypocritical man, and destroying the me who once loved her with my life. In her hatred, perhaps for the first time, there was a vague trace of regret. But to me, it didn't matter anymore. His fate was sealed. Next, it was her turn. Victoria went completely bankrupt. All assets were liquidated. Saddled with debt and penniless, she couldn't even afford the rent for that cheap apartment and was kicked out by the landlord. The once icy CEO was now homeless, wandering the streets. She couldn't put down her pride to find a job, but she hit walls everywhere regardless. No company dared to hire a notorious former CEO blacklisted by the entire business circle. Her fair-weather friends avoided her like the plague. After facing countless rejections and glares, and after starving for 2 whole days, she finally broke. Through a labor agency, she found a job as a janitor at the property management company owned by my corporation. All of this was, of course, my arrangement. I saw her figure on the split screen of the CEO office's surveillance system. She was wearing a gray, washed-out cheap uniform, her hair tied back casually, her face bare and devoid of makeup. She held a mop, her back hunched, struggling to scrub the mirror-like floor of the lobby. That very floor where, not long ago, she had walked with her head held high in 6-inch heels like a queen. I pressed the internal line. Notify everyone. Company-wide team building tonight. Department dinner. It's on me. That night, the office building was brightly lit, filled with laughter. After the party, the departments left behind mountains of trash, bottles, and food scraps. I watched on the monitor as Victoria pushed the cleaning cart alone, silently cleaning up the mess, working late into the night. The next day, I held a cup of freshly brewed Blue Mountain coffee and, accidentally, let my hand slip. The entire cup spilled onto the carpet at the entrance of my office. The brown liquid spread into a glaring stain on the rug. I called the property manager. Send that new cleaner, Victoria Vance, to clean this up. Soon, Victoria walked over with her head lowered, carrying a bucket and a rag. She didn't dare look at me. She squatted by my feet, using the rag to wipe the stain on the floor bit by bit. The bitter aroma of coffee mixed with the cheap smell of cleaning detergent drifted into my nose. I looked down at her slightly trembling shoulders, at her knuckles turning white from exertion. I looked down at her, humble as dust, just as she had once looked down on me. Clean it properly. I spoke in a cold tone devoid of any warmth. These 3 words were exactly what she had said to me 3 years ago when I accidentally knocked over her soup. Even the intonation was identical. Her body stiffened violently. Her shoulders began to shake intensely. I saw crystal liquid, 1 drop, 2 drops, smash onto the carpet, quickly absorbed by the dark wool, disappearing without a trace. She was crying, but she bit her lip tightly, daring not to make a sound, daring not to look up at me. In this moment, she finally tasted what it was like to have her dignity trampled into the mud. Regret grew wildly in her heart like vines. Good. I wanted her to experience my pain and humility from back then. Her personal hell of regret was officially open, and I was the only one holding the torch. As I enjoyed Victoria's pathetic state, there was a knock on the office door. Scarlett entered, full of charm in her signature red high heels. "Darling, what are you busy with?" She walked straight to me, naturally wrapping her arms around my neck from behind and kissing my cheek. Her gaze also fell on Victoria, who was squatting by my feet like a servant. "Oh." Scarlett raised an eyebrow, let go of me, and walked over to Victoria with interest. She looked Victoria up and down, her eyes full of undisguised scrutiny and mockery. "Isn't this the famous Ms. Vance?" "What?" "Vance Enterprises went bankrupt, so you changed careers to experience life." Scarlett's voice wasn't loud, but every word was lethal. Victoria's face instantly turned the color of liver. She gripped the rag tightly, her knuckles white. She wanted to stand up, but because she had been squatting for too long, her legs went numb, and she fell back onto the floor in a humiliating heap. Scarlett chuckled lightly. The sound was crisp, but it lashed across Victoria's face like a whip. She extended her hand, displaying a fresh, exquisite French manicure, and pointed at Victoria's hands, rough and red from long-term exposure to cleaning agents. "Looks like the life experience is going well. But I guess that's all you're good at." Scarlett's tone became sharp and mean. "Thinking you're so great by climbing up on a man, but in the end, losing everything because you bet on the wrong one. Victoria Vance, your life really is a joke." Every sentence stabbed precisely into Victoria's most painful spots. Her business talent, which she took such pride in, was dismissed by Scarlett as climbing up on a man. The love she once believed in so deeply was mocked as betting on the wrong one. In this moment, all her pride and self-esteem were torn to shreds by Scarlett without mercy, thrown on the ground, and trampled. Victoria's lips trembled violently, her face draining of color, yet she couldn't utter a single word in rebuttal. Because everything Scarlett said was true. Scarlett couldn't be bothered to look at her again. She turned and walked to my desk, picking up a file. "I have some new ideas for the Phase 2 planning of the South City project. Let's discuss." She treated Victoria completely like air. After discussing business, Scarlett stood up and once again intimately took my arm. "Honey, to celebrate our smooth cooperation, how about Victoria Harbor Restaurant tonight? I booked the best table." This scene was fully witnessed by Victoria, who had finally managed to climb up from the floor. She watched our intimate posture, saw the happy and triumphant smile on Scarlett's face, and saw the undisguised indulgence in my eyes. Her heart felt as if it had been gouged by a poison knife. Jealousy, regret, unwillingness, pain, all the emotions intertwined, nearly swallowing her whole. She finally understood exactly what she had lost. But unfortunately, it was too late. The consecutive blows finally completely destroyed Victoria's pitiful remnants of self-esteem. She suffered a mental breakdown. She locked herself in that narrow, damp employee dormitory, refusing to eat or drink, washing her face with tears all day. She finally realized completely that she had never loved Julian, that hypocritical straw man. She only loved the phantom of the talented, gentle, perfect man she had conjured in her imagination. And I, the one who had silently sacrificed everything for her for 3 years, treating her like a goddess, was the existence she should have cherished most in her life. But she had personally pushed this treasure away and shattered it. Endless regret drowned her like a tidal wave. She began to frantically want to win me back at any cost. She went to great lengths to find out the address of the villa where I live from her colleagues. It was a stormy night with thunder and lightning. The wind howled, driving bean-sized raindrops to smash against the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating a crackling cacophony. I was standing in the second floor, study holding a glass of red wine, admiring the storm outside. Just then, the video intercom at the villa gate rang. On the screen, a face appeared, washed pale and wretched by the rain. It was Victoria. "Caleb, open the door. I have something to say to you," she screamed, her voice torn apart by the wind and rain. I ignored it. The security guard quickly connected the line and rejected her in a formulaic tone. "Ma'am, this is a private residence. You cannot enter without an appointment." She was stopped outside the main gate of the villa complex. But she didn't leave. Through the surveillance monitor, I watched as she took off her ill-fitting cheap heels in the heavy rain. Then, barefoot in the freezing water, she knelt straight down. The accumulated water on the asphalt instantly soaked her thin clothes. Kneeling at the gate, she shouted my name over and over, screaming herself hoarse. "Caleb, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Come back, okay? Please, give me one more chance. I love you. The person I love is you." Caleb, her crying and confessions, mixed with the sound of the storm, seemed so humble and so laughable. Scarlett had walked over at some point and hugged me gently from behind. She followed my gaze to the pitiful figure kneeling in the rain outside the window. "Does your heart ache for her?" she asked softly, her tone betraying no emotion. I shook my head and downed the red wine in my glass. The liquid slid down my throat, carrying a bittersweet aftertaste. "No." I turned around, putting my back to everything outside the window. "I just find it noisy." I reached out and drew the heavy velvet curtains. The whole world instantly went quiet. The woman's crying and repentance outside, along with the noisy storm, were completely shut out. Victoria knelt outside the villa all night. The rain fell all night. It wasn't until the next morning, when she passed out in the freezing rain from high fever and exhaustion, that she was discovered by early passers-by and sent to the hospital. Her pain, her humility, her repentance. To me, it was nothing but a boring monologue. It wasn't even worthy of being a side dish for my wine. Victoria was hospitalized. Bankrupt ex-EO kneels in rain begging ex-boyfriend for reconciliation, faints, and hospitalized. The next day, similar headlines dominated the front pages of major media outlets. The accompanying photo showed her kneeling in the rain, soaked through, face pale, unconscious. The photo was high definition, displaying her wretchedness and misery vividly. She was socially dead. The whole city was watching her joke, laughing at her stupidity and baseness. She woke up in a standard public hospital. The ward was a 6-person room, crowded, noisy, the air filled with the smell of disinfectant and various odors. There was no one by her side, no family, no friends. She picked up her phone and saw the overwhelming news and the unspeakable comments. She wanted to smash the phone, but she didn't even have the strength to lift her hand. Just when she was in total despair, feeling abandoned by the whole world, the door to the ward was pushed open. I walked in slowly, wearing a spotless suit, under the gaze of a crowd of patients and families. A spark of hope instantly reignited in Victoria's eyes. She struggled, trying to sit up from the bed. "Caleb, you came." Her voice was hoarse and dry from the fever, but full of surprise, as if she had survived a disaster. You still care about me, right?" I walked to her bedside and stopped. I didn't answer her question. I just leaned down and scrutinized her carefully. I looked at her cheeks, flushed from fever, her dry, peeling lips, her hollow, lifeless eyes. Then I spoke slowly. My voice wasn't loud, but like a sharp ice pick, every word pierced the heart. "I have a multi-billion-dollar contract to sign tonight. Do you know how much a minute of my time is worth?" Mimicking the tone she used to boss me around in the hospital back then, I asked coldly, "I'm wasting time to see you. Can your cheap life afford to pay for it?" Identical words. The exact same tone, high and mighty, despising everything. The color drained completely from Victoria's face in that instant. The pitiful hope on her face shattered. Replacing was endless despair and bone-deep pain. This sentence was like a rusted, blunt knife, cutting back and forth across her already riddled heart, grinding it down. So, this is what it feels like to have your dignity and value trampled by the most vicious words. It turns out it hurts this much. Large tears rolled from her hollow sockets, sliding down her pale cheeks silently. I watched her break down without a ripple of emotion in my heart. After the rush of revenge, only emptiness remained. I straightened up and turned to leave without giving her another look. Behind me came her uncontrollable, desperate sobbing. This was the final judgment I gave her. I had grown tired of taking revenge on Victoria. It was time to end all of this completely. My business empire with Scarlett was solidifying by the day, our company's operations deeply intertwined. To maximize profits and put the strongest insurance on our partnership, we decided to merge families. The news was released simultaneously by the Sterling and Pierce families. Heir to the New York Sterling dynasty, Caleb Sterling, to engage Scarlett Pierce of Pierce Global next month. This news, like a thunderclap, detonated across high society once again. Countless financial media and entertainment headlines covered this wedding of the century with full-page spreads. In newspapers and online, photos of Scarlett and me were everywhere. In the photos, we stood together, her arm in mine, smiling brightly. A talented man and a beautiful woman, a match made in heaven. Everyone said we were destined for each other. The final straw that broke the camel's back had finally arrived. Victoria saw the news on a nurse's phone from her hospital bed. She looked at the compatible couple in the photo, read the words of blessing and praise. The last string in her mind, named sanity, snapped with a twang. She broke completely. She violently ripped out the 4-tube from her hand, the needle drawing a string of blood beads. Like a madwoman, wearing a blue and white striped hospital gown, she rushed out of the hospital and onto the street. She had only one thought: find me and stop all of this. She rushed like a lunatic toward the hotel where Scarlett and I were holding the engagement press conference. Naturally, she was firmly blocked outside by tall, imposing security guards. "Caleb, come out. You can't get engaged to her. You're mine. Caleb, you're mine." She screamed and made a scene at the hotel entrance like a shrew, trying to break through the security line. Her ugly state was captured clearly by the reporters who had rushed over with their cameras. She became the biggest laughingstock in the city. The press conference ended, and I walked out of the hotel with Scarlett on my arm. When Victoria saw me, it was as if she saw a lifeline. With strength from nowhere, she actually broke free from the security guard's grip and lunged over like a maniac. She threw herself at my feet, hugging my legs tightly. "Caleb, I can't live without you. Please don't throw me away." She looked up with a face smeared with tears and mucus, begging humbly. "I'll give everything back to you. My company, my money, even my life. Just please don't leave me." I frowned in disgust. Then I lifted my foot and kicked her away without mercy. Just like kicking away a disgusting piece of trash stuck to the sole of a shoe. I pulled a pristine white handkerchief from my suit pocket and carefully wiped the pant leg she had touched. Then I tossed the handkerchief lightly onto her face. "Don't let me see you again." I dropped those cold words. Then, holding Scarlett's hand, I got into the car without looking back under the flashing of countless cameras. The car door closed, cutting off the desperate wailing of the woman behind us. "Victoria Vance, between us, this is the end. The dust has settled." After that press conference, Victoria went completely insane. She was diagnosed with severe schizophrenia accompanied by serious delusions and was sent to a mental sanitarium in the suburbs. In her world, there was no bankruptcy, no betrayal, no abandonment by everyone. She was still the high and mighty CEO of Vance Enterprises who gave the orders. And I was still the Caleb Sterling who obeyed her every whim and loved her like life itself. The doctors said she talked to the air every day. Sometimes she smiled sweetly, sometimes she argued angrily, and sometimes she wept humbly. It was as if I had never left, and she was still enacting a love-hate entanglement that would never end. Scarlett and I held a grand wedding a month later. Our business empire continued to expand at an unprecedented speed after the marriage. I never went to see Victoria again. Only occasionally would I hear bits of news about her from channels the Sterling family kept at the sanitarium. I heard she started learning to paint. One time, I received a letter from the sanitarium with no return name. Inside was only a drawing. On the paper was a queen wearing a magnificent long dress and a crown. At the queen's feet knelt a humble man. On the man's face, my name, Caleb, was scrawled crookedly in red pen. Next to the drawing was a line of text in Victoria's handwriting. "Caleb, come back. I forgive you." I looked at the childish and laughable drawing, my expression blank. Casually, I dropped it into the shredder beside my desk. The harsh grinding sound rang out, and the drawing, along with the absurd words on it, instantly turned into a pile of irretrievable confetti. Outside the window, the sun was shining, warm and gentle. Scarlett walked in holding a cup of coffee and hugged me gently from behind. What are you thinking about? I shook my head, holding the hand she had wrapped around my waist. Nothing. The past, like those shredded pieces of paper, had completely vanished into smoke. In my world, there was no longer a Victoria Vance. From now on, there was only sunshine and the person behind me.